Well, so far this year, there have been no fewer than 8 inquiries set up after the discovery that undercover police have been used to infiltrate political organisations. There may be a 9th soon, because tonight, Newsnight has evidence of another operation in which undercover policemen may have given false evidence in court. The officer became an activist in the Reclaim the Streets campaign and was arrested after a group from the campaign occupied an office. Tonight, it's emerged that these latest revelations have delayed the publication of a report into another undercover cop case, which was due tomorrow. Richard Watson reports.
Though this story has only just come to light, it can be traced back to this demonstration in central London in August 1996. Traffic was brought to a halt by protesters from a non-violent pro-cycling campaign group called Reclaim the Streets. Prominent among them was an activist called Jim Sutton.
Jim was like very practical, you know, he was the man with the van. He was super practical and he was there right at the centre of stuff.
A splinter group of demonstrators left Trafalgar Square and came here to St James's Park, to the headquarters of London Underground. Amongst them was John Jordan, an activist, and Jim Sutton, the undercover policeman. They went into this building through reception and went up the stairs. Their aim was to get to the 7th floor of the chairman's office to unfurl protest banners outside the building. Jim Sutton, the undercover policeman, was playing a leading role. The protesters were here in support of a tube drivers' strike. Jim Sutton was an undercover cop working with the Metropolitan Police unit, which was tasked with penetrating protest movements. As part of the protest group, John Jordan was one of his targets.
We occupied the building, we went up, some people got up to the chairman's office, including Jim. Jim went out, put a massive banner which said, "Don't squeeze the tube."
He says the police arrived remarkably quickly, and there were scuffles. As he went upstairs, he picked up a policeman's helmet on the ground.
Lift doors opened, riot police, jump out of the lift, arrest us all. I had this policeman's helmet under my jumper. Clearly I wasn't pregnant. And I get arrested, get to the police station, and I'm charged with assault of a police officer. Clearly something I didn't do.
The activists, including Jim Sutton, were brought here to Charing Cross Police Station in central London for questioning. They sought legal advice, and a solicitor from the firm Bindmans attended. We've obtained copies of Jim Sutton's custody records. They show he was still using his fake name and his cover as a cleaner, what police intelligence experts call his legend. His statement said, "When I was part of the group going into the building, I intended to unfurl a banner. I was aware that had we sought permission, we would have been denied entry." Jim Sutton and 12 other activists were later charged with public order offences. The undercover cop was now entering the legal process. But this didn't emerge until now. After all the reporting earlier this year about undercover cop Mark Kennedy, Jim Sutton's name appeared in the media as another undercover operative. The solicitor working on the Kennedy cases was curious.
We looked at our records, and our records confirmed that one of them, at least, Jim Sutton, had been a client of ours.
You must have been amazed when you saw that.
I was shocked, actually. I thought it couldn't be true, but it is true.
John Jordan and the others thought Jim Sutton was a fellow defendant when their cases all went to a criminal trial.
He would have given evidence under oath about who he was, about what had happened, and perhaps as serious, he allowed himself to be put in a position where he was arrested, charged, prosecuted, and potentially would have been convicted of a criminal offence. It's just because the district judge found him not guilty that he wasn't actually convicted, but he and probably, perhaps, his minders allowed him to be put in a position where he could be found guilty of a criminal offence. And if that's a criminal offence committed by a serving undercover police officer giving evidence on oath with the benefit of privileged legal advice he shouldn't have had, then that's most serious.
Bindmans have asked for an explanation from the Metropolitan Police and the CPS, but are yet to receive an answer. We asked the Lib Dem member of the Metropolitan Police Authority for her reaction tonight.
It is just almost beyond belief. I'm coming to terms with the fact that it has happened, but it just beggars belief. I mean, how on earth can that happen? It makes a complete mockery of the judicial system. there are some very serious questions that must be asked of the police, and that is, who in the Met authorised it, if anyone? If they authorised it, why did they authorise it? And is that person still working for the Met? It is one of the things that I am certainly going to be asking the Commissioner at the next meeting of the Metropolitan Police Authority at the end of November.
For John Jordan, these are serious issues. He was convicted at the trial, which now looks unsafe.
It was totally outrageous what happened. I'm a lecturer, I have jobs where I'm working with students and so on, and to have assault of a police officer on your record was pretty, was difficult.
I think it's a perversion of the legal process. I think it's institutionalised police corruption of the legal process for this to happen, and at the very least they ought to be explaining up front, they ought to have explained up front what their acceptable limits are, so that the public, so that politicians and so that judges who might or should be regulating their activity could have a say and a view, but they seem to have gone freelance on this.
The Met Police declined to comment today on this specific case, but pointed us towards new legislation from 2000 which should have made it impossible for undercover officers to give evidence in court using their false identities. But the key question now is how many cases went through before this?
Well, Richard Watson is here. Further developments tonight, I gather?
Yeah, quite extraordinary, actually. I mean, just 15 or 16 minutes ago, the HM Inspectorate of Constabulary, which was due to launch a very important report tomorrow about the use of undercover officers and the protocols surrounding that, they've said, in the light of the allegations in the media today, i.e. our story and the Guardian story, we are delaying the launch of our report. This is so we can consider the relevance of this information, so recommendations for improvement in undercover policing. We will be writing to the Guardian Newsnight to invite them to provide additional information they have. Metropolitan Police have been changing their line on this, I think it's fair to say, all day. At first it was a no comment, then it became quite a procedural amount of information about the use of undercover officers. Just tonight, in the last 6 minutes, they've said the Metropolitan Police Service acknowledges these are serious matters and is continuing to review the situation and will take account of any additional information that becomes available. So I think this story is moving very fast indeed.
Richard, thank you. Well, Ken MacDonald, the former Director of Public Prosecutions in England and Wales, is here now to react to tonight's story. What do you make of this latest disclosure about an undercover policeman?
Well, they've crossed the line. You don't send police officers into court to lie about who they are, about their identity, about what their role is in a series of offences. You don't send them into solicitors' offices pretending to be defendants and being party to confidential legal conferences. They've crossed the line, and it's a serious issue.
And what does it do to the convictions of anyone who was arrested and convicted in those?
Well, it calls them seriously into question. I mean, if I was a defence lawyer representing someone who was in the dock with another individual who was an undercover police officer, and I'd advise both of them in a confidential meeting, I'd be going to the Court of Appeal tomorrow saying this conviction is unsafe and it has to be overturned. And I'm quite sure that's what will happen, where defence lawyers are confident that this has been the situation.
Has to be overturned because?
Because you have a situation where a police officer is posing as a defendant, is party to defence conferences with his lawyers and the other defendants' lawyers, is party to confidential information, may be passing it back to his handlers, and is going into court as part of the defence team telling lies.
So he knows what the defence is likely to be?
He knows what the defence is likely to be. He may be reporting it back to the police. That may in all sorts of ways affect the way the case is conducted. It seems to me clearly the Court of Appeal would regard a conviction in those circumstances as being potentially unsafe.
Do you think that this latest revelation makes the case for yet another inquiry?
Well, the report that was to be released tomorrow has been held back. I'm not at all surprised by that. I think the authors of that report are going to have to stand back, look at the evidence that you've produced, the Guardian produced, see how that impacts on the research that they've done. This is a very serious development, and this seems to be part of a pattern of behaviour of undercover police officers in groups that are not particularly dangerous. We're not talking about terrorists here.
It's a bunch of cyclists.
We're not talking about terrorists here. We're talking about a cyclist campaign group, and this is what's so difficult to understand. The police would have taken the risk of putting people into these situations, putting them into court, not because they're combating any sort of serious crime, but because people are stopping the traffic. That seems to be, on the face of it, a monumental misjudgment.
Okay, MacDonald, thank you.